is the hottest diet trend and one that I actually really love. Intermittent fasting is taking off and it's helping so many people today lose weight. Now, I'm not surprised at the fact that intermittent fasting is working, and it's working for me. Fasting by itself has been around for centuries, and it's a part of every major religious tradition. Research today has proven the health benefits of fasting. These include things like living longer and reducing inflammation, and now that is a definite win. But it's also responsible for something called autophagy. Autophagy is the cleanup process of the body. So essentially what happens is that our body, when it processes toxins, when it starts to age, it tries to correct that. And if we're fasting, that whole process is even more efficient. Fasting, though, can be really tough, right? And it's hard to do in any sort of systematic fashion. So here's where we all welcome intermittent fasting. And there seems to be a structure and a rhythm to intermittent fasting that is working for so many different people and a lot of the patients that I see in practice. There are three main types of intermittent fasting, so let's take a look at them and review them. The first is what I call the 16-8. So the 16-8 in research is actually the type of intermittent fasting that is the most effective. And what's happening here is that you are eating in an 8-hour interval, so maybe between 12 and 8 or 11 and 7. You get to pick it, which is the beauty of intermittent fasting, but then you're fasting for the entire interval around that. So for example, if you're doing a 12-8 interval, so you start eating at noon, you cut off eating at about 8 p.m., then you won't eat from 8 to 12 noon again. And that seems to work, and the research is really supporting it. The other thing the research is saying, though, about the 16-8 interval is that they're also recommending that that interval be moved up. So the people that do an earlier fast seem to do better. So for example, if you did an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., that actually helps you to lose even more weight than those of us that are doing like the 11 to 7 or the 12 to 8. So the 16-8 is the most popular. It's the one that most people are able to do and able to easily do. The next is the 24-hour fast. So this one is interesting and challenging. This is where 1 to 2 days a week, some people will fast just for 1 or 2 days. So you'll eat normally, you'll pick a random Tuesday, maybe a Thursday, you'll fast completely on that Tuesday or Thursday, but then go back to eating again. Research says maybe better to eat consistently, but it does help a little bit, but there is some merit there for sure. The 5-2 fast is the other form of intermittent fasting, and you may have seen this when you're looking at all the different diet trends right now, but that's where 5 days of the week you're eating normally, but 2 days of the week you're dropping down to 500 or 600 calories a day. So for 2 days, you're really depriving yourself, for lack of a better word. The other 5 days, you're kind of normal. So all of these forms of intermittent fasting seem to help do one key thing. They help to reduce our total caloric load. So they teach us all to eat less and maybe to eat less often, which is helping, of course, to lose weight. The 16-8 seems to be the most effective out of the three. Now, what a lot of us are finding, including myself, is that by keeping these fasting intervals, it lowers insulin. And if you remember, insulin is the hormone that triggers inflammation, it triggers insulin resistance, and it puts us right into storage mode. So when we're all walking around with high insulin levels due to a number of factors, then we're storing. So we're storing the food we eat, and we typically store it around our abdomen. It's usually the first place that we'll see it. So intermittent fasting helps to reverse this. It helps to bring insulin levels down, reduce insulin resistance. So it's really working for people with like prediabetes or people that are in higher insulin states. And it does help to reduce belly fat, which is the only sign we really have, quite honestly, of visceral fat, which is that fat that accumulates around our organs and can really affect our overall health. Now, most of the research does support intermittent fasting, as I mentioned, as a win for weight loss and for insulin resistance. Now, there's always going to be a debate on what the best fasting interval is. So earlier versus later, cycling to the 5-2 or the 24-hour. Here's what I think. I think you have to pick the type of fasting that works best for you. And based off what I've seen in practice and in research, the 16-8 is really my favorite. And it's the easiest to kind of do and start there, especially for those of you that might be travelers and you're in a different coast or on a different time zone at any given moment. It helps you to kind of have some control of when you're eating and control the quantity and the amount that you're eating. So I say start with the 16-8, do it just 2 days a week to begin with, work your way up to doing it 5 days a week, and then once you have it down, stay there for a solid 3 weeks, and you should truly see a change in your waist size. Here's some of my other rules for that 16-8 cycle. So remember, just because you're fasting, and this is something I've seen a lot of patients struggle with a little bit, just because you're fasting, it doesn't mean that when you go to eat, it's a free-for-all, that you can have all the junk food in the world and all the potato chips and hamburgers and fast food that you can possibly consume in that 8-hour eating interval. That's not the right way to do intermittent fasting. What we really want to do instead is break that fast with something that has a lot of protein. So here's some examples: a protein smoothie, a couple of eggs, maybe adding a gut tonic to really get your digestion going. Those can be things like ginger water or apple cider vinegar and water. Follow that break fast with eating then every 4 hours, because remember, the more that we're snacking and grazing, we keep insulin levels up, and that in turn signals our body to store. Try to avoid a really late eating interval like the 1 to 9 p.m. or the 2 to 10 p.m. Again, if you have to, because that's your work schedule or your life schedule, that's okay. It's still better than not fasting at all. Also remember to stay hydrated throughout the day. So it's okay to do that morning, I get asked this all the time, by the way, it's okay to do that morning cup of coffee or tea, and then you want to stay really well hydrated throughout the rest of the fast. Breakfast was the most important meal until the majority of the population started going into high insulin resistance mode, issues with weight, because what's happening is that we can't control, for whatever reasons, I think it's our stress response, we can't control the total amount of calories we're all consuming, because we want to eat meals with our family, we want to go out, we want to do all these different things. We end up grazing and snacking throughout the day. We're sitting a lot, and so we're all kind of collectively over-consuming. So the key is that breakfast is still an important meal, but it can be delayed to a little bit later in the day. And secondly, if you don't have a lot of fat stored, or you don't have a weight issue, or you don't have a lot of belly fat, then intermittent fasting is not right for you, because it works completely on the premise of lowering your insulin level, using the fat that you've stored, and if you don't have that, you need to eat traditionally, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you're stuck, not seeing progress, then think about trying one of the other styles of intermittent fasting, the 24-hour or the 5-2. This will shift your metabolic pathway and get you out of a plateau. Intermittent fasting has worked for me, and since I travel so much, it helps me when my time zones shift. Have you tried intermittent fasting? What do you think? I'd love to know, and let me know what works for you.